A lot of fans have watched or even read the Harry Potter series and have all come to the conclusion that the Dursleys were truly terrible people. This was solidified by the way they treated Harry ever since he was orphaned by Voldemort. Interestingly enough though, throughout the last two movies in the series, we learned something that might hint that Harry's mistreatment by his aunt, uncle and cousin was all indirectly caused by the wizard himself. In fact, according to this theory, it all leads back to the night that Voldemort killed Harry's parents and failed to kill the boy. Harry was a Horcrux. For almost the entire series, Harry Potter fans have wondered why the young wizard had such a strong connection to Lord Voldemort, and when we found out that Harry was unknowingly a Horcrux, everything seemed to make sense. A Horcrux is defined in the Harry Potter universe as being an object that was imbued with a fragment of a soul that belonged to a dark witch or wizard. According to the rules of the spell that is used to create a Horcrux, they can only be made after committing murder, which is considered to be the supreme act of evil. When a wizard does this, it's said to tear their soul, a fragment of which can be imbued into a physical object, like a necklace, by committing another horrific act while the soul is still weakened from the murder. And for anyone who might be unclear as to how Harry became a Horcrux, it's actually really interesting, and I wish they'd spent a little more time explaining it in the movies. When Voldemort killed James and Lily Potter, Lily sacrificed herself to protect the child, Harry. So when Voldemort cast the killing curse towards Harry, who was still just a baby, his mother's protection ward reflected the curse back at Voldemort, effectively killing the Dark Wizard. However, because he had just committed a double homicide, Voldemort's soul was torn apart and ended up turning Harry into a living Horcrux. In other words, the Dark Lord didn't intend to turn Harry into a Horcrux. It just sort of happened that way. Realistically, Voldemort only wanted 6 Horcruxes, which consisted of Tom Riddle's diary, Marvolo Gaunt's ring, Slytherin's locket, Helga Hufflepuff's cup, Ravenclaw's diamond, and lastly, Nagini. After creating the 6 original Horcruxes, Voldemort knew that his soul couldn't withstand being torn apart anymore, so he likely didn't plan on making another one. But after the Dark Lord basically unalived himself when he tried to kill Harry, the last bit of his soul managed to attach itself to the child who carried Voldemort with him for the last 18 years of his life. However, an even darker aspect came out of Harry being Voldemort's secret 7th Horcrux, that not only affected the young wizard, but also the Muggle family that was supposed to watch over him. The Dursleys were affected by the dark magic. The Dursleys were shown to be a Muggle family with hardly any actual ties to magic, which is why they would have all been easily susceptible and affected by dark magic. In fact, the only connection they had to the wizarding world was the fact that Aunt Petunia was related to Harry's mother, who was supposedly a very powerful witch. And even though they didn't realise it, with Harry being one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, they were around dark magic almost every day for the first 11 years of Harry's life. After that, their time around Harry was limited to summer vacation when he wasn't allowed to stay at Hogwarts, but it was already too late. They'd found themselves manipulated by the trace amounts of dark magic that seeped out of Harry, which led them to become truly awful people. I mean, as a kid, I knew that they weren't good role models for their nephews, but as an adult, I see how cruel Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon really were to the young wizard. For the first decade of his life, he was forced to sleep in the broom closet underneath the stairs, and when he would misbehave, they would lock him inside of it as a punishment. There's no excusing that behaviour, although there is definitely a reason for it, and according to this theory, it's because Harry was a Horcrux. Toward the end of the Harry Potter season, it was made clear that being around a Horcrux can affect someone's mindset and emotional state. The prime example of this was Ron's reaction to being around Slytherin's locket. In the movie, Ron was shown growing more and more irritated by the state of the world, and the fact that he had been running around with Harry and coming up with hardly any answers on how to stop the darkness that was quickly taking over. It even got to the point where Ronnie and Harry almost fought. They shoved each other a little bit before Harry told Ron that he should just leave if he was going to keep being a crybaby. So if that Horcrux, Slytherin's locket, had such a strong effect on Ron, imagine what sort of effect Harry, who was also a Horcrux, had on the Dursleys. Ron was a relatively powerful wizard that came from a long line of wizards, whereas Aunt Petunia, Uncle Vernon, and Dudley were all muggles, meaning that they would have likely felt the effects of the dark magic a lot more than Ron did. Now, one argument against this theory might be the fact that Harry didn't seem to negatively alter the emotional state of anyone else around him, so why would it only impact the Dursleys? Well, Harry most likely didn't have as much dark magic infused into him as the other 6 intentional Horcruxes did. In other words, the amount of dark magic inside Harry was so minor that it wouldn't even be traceable by an actual wizard. However, it might have just been strong enough to turn Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon into the monsters that they were portrayed as in the movies and the books. As for Dudley, he likely got the worst of it, as he grew up around the dark magic, while also being raised by parents who were teaching him that it was okay to treat his cousin Harry like a piece of trash. This means, whether he liked it or not, Harry most likely played a part in how his aunt and uncle treated him, though that's not an excuse for the mental abuse that they put him through. As a human though, you also have to realize that it wasn't only the dark magic that was left inside of Harry that made Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon such terrible adoptive parents. Grief played its own part. The Dursley family was also afflicted with grief following the death of Harry's parents, particularly his Aunt Petunia. As mentioned before, Petunia was Lily's sister, and whether they were on good terms or not, she certainly grieved for her sister. It's been pointed out by fans that Petunia was most likely very jealous of her sister Lily, and the magical gifts that she was born with. Growing up a muggle in a family that has even one witch or wizard would be difficult, especially if you knew that there was no chance that you'd ever develop those same abilities. That's exactly what Petunia had to go through. She was born a muggle and her sister was born a witch. In comparison, her life was very plain and ordinary. However, that doesn't mean that Petunia didn't love her sister, and she certainly grieved after Lily's death. And if you don't believe me, she basically said so herself as she was forced out of her home in the Deathly Hallows Part 1. When Harry was explaining the dangers that she was in, Petunia replied, "Do you think I don't know what they're capable of? You didn't just lose a mother that night in Godric's Hollow, you know. I lost a sister." And you can really hear the pain in her voice when she said that. This entire time that it looked like she could only show anger and malice towards her nephew, she was also masking a deep pain that a lot of fans seem to overlook. That is, after all, why they agreed to take Harry into their homes in the first place. To honour Lily and to protect their family. Granted, that's still no excuse for how the young wizard was treated. And that's why, as sad as this might sound, it was for the better that Harry and his relatives parted ways before his battle with Voldemort's army. Because it would be the only way the Dursleys would be freed from the curse of the dark magic. What happened to the Dursleys? Believe it or not, the ending for the Dursleys and their relationship with Harry was actually really deep, despite a little bit of it that was shown in the movies. As you might remember, right before the battle between the Order of the Phoenix and the Death Eaters, Harry's aunt and uncle were forced to abandon their home. It was the home that Aunt Petunia claimed to have lived in for 20 years. She was heartbroken to be forced out in a single day. She knew why she had to leave though. It was for the safety of her family. Honestly, it was probably for the best, because they weren't forced to be around the dark magic that resided in Harry anymore. As for what happened next, it's only briefly spoken about in the books. The only one of the Dursleys to truly reconcile with Harry was his cousin Dudley, and interestingly enough, it was noted that their children played together sometimes. As for Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon, they were supposedly on good terms with the Potter family, though they didn't see each other very often, which is understandable after all that they had been through. What do you think though? Was the fact that Harry was a Horcrux the real reason that the Dursleys treated him so poorly? Make sure you let me know in the comments below. And thank you for checking out Flixplained. If you enjoyed this fan theory, hit that like button to let us know, and consider subscribing so that you don't miss out on more interesting fan theories just like this one.